So we're going to start looking at factoring trinomials using the X method and GCFs. So to start off, let's go ahead and let's think about the first question you probably have, which is just remembering what is a trinomial. When we talk about trinomials, we're simply talking about an algebraic expression that has three separate terms. For example, 2x squared plus 4x plus 7 is a trinomial. It has 1, 2, 3 separate terms. As we look at factoring trinomials, we'll very specifically be looking at trinomials that have a power of 2 as the primary exponent. Okay, this is looking at a quadratic function. So as we look at these trinomials with these powers of 2, the next thing to think about is what exactly do they mean and what kind of shape do they look like. And so let's talk about standard form. Standard form of a trinomial is simply this: ax squared plus bx plus c. If you take our last example of 2x squared plus 4x plus 7, we're just pulling out our values. A would be equal to 2, B would be equal to 4, and C would be equal to 7. Okay. The coefficients of A, B, and C match up with the coefficients in our actual problem, 2, 4, and 7. So whenever we're talking about a trinomial, we always want it in this format: ax squared plus bx plus c, because that's going to allow you to find your values for A, B, and C, which become very important as we start factoring. So let's look at how we actually start factoring this kind of a problem. So the X method is built around this ax squared plus bx plus c format. And why we call it the X method is very straightforward. We're going to draw an X, and at the top of this X will be the value of A times C, and at the bottom will be the value of B. And so what we need to do is find ways to fill in the two unknown parts of the X. And here's what we do. We have to find two numbers that multiply to make the value of A times C in the top, and those same numbers add up to make B, our value in the bottom. Once we've done that, we'll go ahead and we'll factor by grouping all of those terms together in this format. That is, we're going to take the first term, the answers to our X, and then our last term. So in this case, our first term would be whatever ax squared is. Our last term is whatever c is. And the answers to the X are whatever numbers we have here with an X here. So question mark with an X, question mark with an X. We're simply going to find these values and then plug them in. So it's a lot easier to see how this works when we start looking at it in context. So let's take a look at a couple of examples. So here's our first example: x squared plus 4x plus 4. I've gone ahead and copied out our notes from the previous page in the upper right so we can keep an eye on them. So let's go ahead and start filling in our values. I'll start by drawing my x, and I'm going to write down A, B, and C, because I'm going to have to identify all of those. So if I look at my problem, my value of A, which is the coefficient of my x squared term, is going to be 1. My coefficient for my B term is 4, and my C term is 4 as well. So on top we have A times C, or 1 times 4. So 1 times 4, which is just 4. On the bottom we have our B term, which is, again, just 4. So now we've filled out our X, and we want to go ahead and find two numbers that multiply to make A times C, and then add up to make B. As we look at this, we should see pretty quickly that the values that add up to make 4 and also multiply to make 4 are going to be the numbers 2 and 2. So those will be our unknowns or our question mark values. Now we just need to plug it all in according to our notes. So we'll take our first term, x squared, and then we'll take our last term, c, in this case 4. Now, you'll notice that in our example, we had plus or minus because we don't know whether it's going to be a positive or negative value. In this case, our 4, our c term, is positive, as is our a term. If we look at our question mark terms, the ones we have here in our problem, we'll notice that they're both positive 2's. So we'll have positive values when we insert them. So now we take our number 2, and we're going to add that x to it for both of these terms. So there we go. We've gone ahead, we've used the x method to build our new problem. Now we just need to factor by grouping of all the remaining terms. So let's go ahead and do that. As we look at x squared plus 2x plus 4, we can see pretty quickly that we can pull out an x term from the first pair, and we can pull out a positive 2 from the second pair. That is, I'm grouping my sets as such, x squared plus 2x and 2x plus 4. So x squared divided by x gives us x back, 2x divided by x gives us 2 back, 2x divided by 2 gives us x, and 4 divided by 2 gives us 2. So we end up with x times x plus 2 plus 2 times x plus 2. If we go ahead and follow our pattern, pull out our GCF of x plus 2 and multiply it by what's left, we get x plus 2 times x plus 2. Or you could rewrite this as simply x plus 2 squared. Either of these answers would be considered correct. Let's look at another example. Here's our new example, x squared plus 7x plus 10. Once again, I've got my notes in the upper right so we can follow along. So let's build this problem. Draw my x, draw a, draw b, draw c, and let's fill those out. My coefficient for my x squared term is 1, my coefficient for b is 7, and my coefficient for c is 10. At the top, we have once again a times c, which is 1 times 10, or just 10, and at the bottom we have 7. This one's a little harder than the previous problem in that we don't have the same number, so we have to find our values. So to figure out which numbers multiply to make a times c and add to make b, one way we could look at it would be simply take our value of a times c and find the factors. So if a times c is 10, then we know that to multiply to get 10, you have 1 times 10, 2 times 5. If we look at those, we can then add them up. 1 plus 10 is 11, 2 plus 5 is 7, so immediately we can see that our values that go in each side are the number 2 and the number 5. So let's write it all out together. So our first term, x squared, plus our first question mark term, which in this case is 2x, plus our second question mark term, which is 5x, plus our last term, which is c. So we get x squared plus 2x plus 5x plus 10. Once again, we're going to go ahead and factor by grouping. I can pull an x out of these two and get back x plus 2. And I can pull a 5 out of these two values and get back x plus 2 again. If you're checking your work, you'll notice that once again, what's in the parentheses is the same, so we've done it correctly. We'll factor out our new GCF of x plus 2 and multiply it by what's left, x plus 5. And that there is our correct answer. If we were to find our answer by the box method to check it, it would come out with our original problem, x squared plus 7x plus 10. Let's look at one last example. Same setup as previous. I've got my notes in the upper right, and now I've got something slightly different. My a value has a value to it, so let's go ahead and write everything out. There's my x, my a, my b, and my c. My values for a is positive 2. My value for b is positive 11. My value for c, positive 12. On the top of my x, I get a times c, which is 24. And at the bottom, I get 11. So now immediately I have to figure out what will multiply together to give me 24 and add to get 11. So again, I'm going to take 24, my a times c value, and figure out what my factors are. We have 1 and 24, 2 and 12, 3 and 8, 4 and 6. Those are my factors. As I check to see what they add up to, we notice that 1 and 24 becomes 25, 2 and 12 is 14, 3 and 8 is 11, and 4 and 6 is 10. So, since I need a value that adds up to 11, I can choose 3 and 8. And I'm going to go ahead and add those to my x. So, let's put it all together again. We have our first term, 2x squared. The first unknown term, 3x. The second unknown term, 8x. And my final unknown term, or excuse me, not my unknown term, but my last term itself, of 12. Next up, we need to go ahead and figure out what do these share? How can we factor by grouping? If I look at this first section, I see that they do share an x. And if I divide x out, we get 2x squared divided by x gives us 2x. 3x divided by x gives us 3. And in the second portion, I'll notice that both 8x and 12 share the value 4. 8x divided by 4 gives you 2x. 12 divided by 4 gives you 3. And since my parentheses match, we've done something correctly. I'll pull out my GCF of 2x plus 3, and I'll multiply it by what's left of x plus 4. So this is the basics of using the X method and factor by grouping to factor a standard trinomial. So we'll go ahead and we'll practice several of these before we move on to some special cases.